Well, hello, everybody. It is such a pleasure to be back. Thank you for that awesome introduction. I say be back because this is my second time with this particular conference. I had the pleasure of being with you last year. We talked about the imposter syndrome. So those of you that were able to be in on that main session, we had a great time. But this particular topic is also near and dear to my heart because we're talking about that bounce back ability, better known as resilience. So I'm going to share my screen with you. We're going to dive right in. We've got a short period of time. I got a lot I want to pack in there. So let's just get started, okay? Hold tight. I think I'm managing this pretty well. Here we go. As I said, this is developing resilience, which is getting your bounce back game up. That's kind of the tagline that I want you to keep in mind as we go through this presentation. Why? Because sometimes we can't really put our finger on what resilience is. It seems kind of abstract, but for the most part, you know what your bounce back game is, right? You know what it takes for you to get back up on your feet. Or how long it takes for you to get back up on your feet, depending on the kind of hit that you take. So that's kind of what I want you to keep in the back of your head during this session. Now, again, my name is Camille Jamerson, as they stated, and I am the CEO of CDJ Associates, as well as the Camille Company. CDJ Associates is a business management firm. We specialize in public relations, in branding, in marketing, communications, and strategy. For the Camille Company, it's fairly new, and it is a lifestyle brand for ICE, which stands for Icons, Creatives, and Entrepreneurs. You can follow me on Twitter at CD Jamerson or on Instagram at the Camille Company. Those are my websites there as well. If you do follow me, please make certain that you let me know where I met you. And that if you tweet something or post something that you gleaned from this session, please tag me. I'd love to retweet it and share it with my network and get a feel from you as to what worked, what you liked, what you enjoyed, and what you were able to glean from it. These are the hashtags that we're going to be using for today's session, bounce back, as well as the conference hashtag. Of course, please make certain that you include those as well. So what is resilience and why do you need it? Right? That's kind of what our session is going to be about. If you're in this whole resilience track, then you're going to probably hear a lot of definitions about what resilience is. And I got news for you. They're probably all right. But I picked a very specific definition for the purposes of this session. And I'll share more as to why that is in a second. Process. The thing that I want you to remember is that resilience is a process. It's not an event. It's not something that you can just pour out of a bottle, boom, you're done. It's a regimen, right? It's a behavior. It's a strategy that you use, a template that you use and activate every time it's needed, every time that you get knocked down by an issue, a situation, a tragedy, a hardship, whatever those things that come your way that knock you down, you have a strategy or process that you can put on it to reduce the time between the tragedy and your bounce back. So as far as the definition, and this is why I went with this definition, because the APA, which is the American Psychiatrists Association, I believe it is, they use this as their definition for resilience. And I love it because they acknowledge the process piece in building or developing resilience. And their definition reads this way: it's the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedies, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stressors. So again, they acknowledge that, again, it's not a switch, it's a process. And the process is what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I'm going to be sharing with you about 5 keys. There were 10, but because of the length of time that I had to share with you, I had to cut the presentation in half. So I grabbed the 5 most important ones to share with you today. So how do you use these keys, though, to activate the resilience? So these 4 points I wanted to share with you before we start diving into the 5, okay? The first thing that I want you to know is that you are responsible for adapting these to your situation, okay? Our issues may not be the same, but you can make the skill set that I'm going to share with you today transferable and applicable to whatever it is that you're going through. What we went through doesn't have to be the same. You may not have faced a divorce. You may not have faced losing your home or raising 5 kids single-handedly. You might not have had to deal with any of that. Your issues may look different, but that doesn't mean they aren't just as serious. And it doesn't mean that you can't take these skill sets and make it applicable to your situation. Second thing that I want you to keep in mind is that you might not need all of these keys. Okay, you might find 1 or 2 of these that just work like a mug every time, and it gets you back on the path of bouncing back more so than the other ones would, and you just keep working those 2. That's fine. That's totally okay. But here's the thing. Make certain, though, that you don't just find the one, oh, that one works, and you kind of tune out for the rest of this. No, I want you to pay attention to all the keys that I share, because you want to keep all these keys in your back pocket, because you don't ever want to find yourself that you get to the door of an issue and you don't have a key to unlock it. So take all of the keys, all of them with you, the ones that you think will work for you, and the ones that you think may not, because it may be something that you can use in the future for a problem that's unforeseen, or it might be a key that you could share with someone else that did not necessarily work for you, but may work for them. Okay, so keep it in your back pocket to use for yourself or for someone else. Now, the third thing is that these may spark other ideas. So you might hear something that I say and be like, okay, that doesn't necessarily sound like me, but that makes me think about, what if I did such and such and so and so? You might find a key within a key. That's totally okay. That's fine. If it sparks your ideas towards building a strategic plan for overcoming adversity, it works for me. The fourth, and probably the most important one to remember, is that none of these will work. None of them. I don't care how cute they look on the screen. I don't care how many times you write them on your paper. I don't care how many times you tweet them. I don't care how many times you talk about them when this conference and event is over. None of these will work unless you truly work them consistently. Okay? None of them will work. And so it's easy for you to look at these, oh, Camille, that won't work for me. You don't know that yet. You haven't tried them. You haven't worked them. So you don't know what will work for you and what won't. So make certain that you take these keys and you work them. You put that strategy on an issue and see if it will not work for you, and get your bounce back game going a little bit quicker. Okay. Again, the goal for this is to shorten the time between the knockout and the bounce back. Okay. And some of us have seen this in, I'll use relationships, for example. It used to take us 1.5 years to get over somebody, right? You break up, you laid out, I mean, all the first Christmas without them, you about to pass out. It took us forever. Now, by the weekend, you like, you know what? I think I'm gonna be all right, because you've done it often enough to know that, first of all, you're gonna live through it. Secondly, you learned what to do or not to do from the previous time. And you also know that you don't have time to waste. So the time between the knockout and the bounce back has been shortened due to experience. Now, that doesn't mean you don't get knocked out again. That doesn't mean that the next breakup won't hurt. But going in, because of your experience, that, as the old folks used to say to us, that trouble don't last always, right? Because of your experience that trials are going to come, but you can suit up and you can manage them more strategically and quicker every single time. Here we go. Number 1, the very first thing that you need to do is separate what is true from what is not true. Separate the fact from the fiction, because sometimes when you're in the throes of an issue, there's so much information coming at you that you start taking it all in, right? Instead of separating what is true in this moment and what is fiction in this moment, okay? So you are working at separating the real from the assumed, right? Because there's some things that you might be assuming about this situation that you need to determine, okay, is that really true, or am I just thinking that? Am I really about to get put out of my house, or am I just afraid to deal with this landlord? Okay, right? So you got to separate what's real from what's assumed. You've got to think about what is happening around me versus what is happening to me, okay? What's happening around you might be, in this particular case, COVID-19. But what is happening to you? Do you have it? Right? So that's separating fact from fiction. You can get so wound up about what's going on in our world right now, you'll forget, wait a minute, I don't even have COVID. Now, that definitely doesn't mean that you need to be irresponsible. It definitely doesn't mean that you have the right to gloat. It does mean that you have the right to be grateful and focus your attention on something else, because that's not your issue right now, okay? You might have a heart for those that are dealing with it. You might have a heart for the tragedy that it's caused, and that's fine. But you have to remember that it is not affecting you in that way. Separate what's fact from what's fiction. Another way to look at it is that you have to look at what's happening because of you, okay, versus what's happening that you had absolutely nothing to do with. Okay, there are some things that are going on in your life right now that you are solely responsible for. You did it, period. You got to own that. You got to own that, and you've got to own the fact about that. Now, there are other things that you might feel that way about, but when you really peel back the layers, you'll discover that you didn't have anything to do with that. That's something that happened to you that you didn't have any control over, or something that happened around you, about you, or whatever, that you didn't have any control over. So you need to separate the fact from the fiction so you can understand what's really true about what's happening now. Why is that important? Because if you don't know what's really true about what's happening now, you don't even know what problem to attack, okay? You don't even know what problem to attack. So number 2, don't let adversity just happen to you. Don't let it just happen to you. You're like, Camille, well, nobody would just willingly let it happen to you. Let me explain what I mean by that. I mean that you can't necessarily control the weather, right? We don't control the weather, but we control how we drive through it, I should say. So if you can, at bare minimum, you can't control the weather, but grab the reins and steer that mug, right? Make a plan to manage it. And you're like, okay, Camille, you're talking about things that maybe you should mention at the end, like an after action review. No, I put this here intentionally. Why? Because I'm busy giving you a strategy that you already probably have some insight on. Why? Because you've been through things before. Go back and look. Right? You've already been through some issues that you can go back to and glean the lessons from to better prepare you for your future bouts. So don't miss those lessons. Go back and get them. And it's a map that you can use to navigate your future issues. You knew how you handled that last thing. So go back and do it after action review. So when that sucker comes back around, you have a strategy in place to deal with it effectively. For example, think about anytime, go back, think about some of your past issues. 5 things that I'm going to do, change, or learn because of X, Y, and Z. Okay? That's one way that you can start making a plan. Or let's say you're having an issue on your job. You can think, okay, here's my plan. I'm going to change how I document my project progress from now on. I'm going to make sure that I send a follow-up email after every phone conversation to cover my own behind. And I'm going to list differently what I'm going to ask in my performance reviews. Okay, so that's a strategy and a plan that you're putting in place to handle a job issue. with coronavirus, let's go back to that. You might say, okay, I caught it or didn't catch it, doing well now, but I'm going to change some of my health habits, because what I've learned through this adversity is that people with pre-existing or serious health issues were more susceptible to catching the virus due to a compromised or an overworked immune system. So I'm going to build my immune system. I'm going to put a plan in place to help circumvent that adversity. Okay. So let's say you let's go back to our jobs or careers. You get passed over for a job. Put a plan in place. I am going to learn how to speak Spanish. Why? Because this is the third doggone job interview that was the perfect position for me that I was overlooked for because I'm not bilingual. Or a job that I wanted to apply for, but I saw that one of the requirements was being bilingual. So you put a plan in place. When the last time you got overlooked for that job, or you got that email, sorry, we picked such and such and so, that was a setback for you. That was a hardship for you. That was an issue for you. And you didn't have a plan in place to handle that. Now you do. Okay. So don't let adversity just happen to you without missing the lesson. Go back and look at some of your past issues. You probably can learn a lot from how you handled those and use that as a backdrop for how you're going to handle things in the future. Number 3, which is one of my favorites, it's transform a hardship into a challenge. And you're probably like, okay, Camille, you're just talking about semantics. Just change what I say about it. Labeling something as a challenge instead of labeling it as a hardship is more than a matter of semantics. And here's why. Hardship puts into your mind suffering or a negative connotation, right? Whereas when you deem something as a challenge, all of a sudden you start thinking that it's an opportunity. And not only do you think that, your body responds to how you think about that, right? So you're asking yourself how you can turn a negative situation that you're facing into a productive one. That's the shift that we're looking at here. It's not a hardship. It is a challenge. Now, a professor that I was studying, preparing for this, Dr. Hellerstein, he's at Columbia University, I believe it is. He was explaining in one of his white papers that if you view a situation as a threat, that your fear response systems are automatically set off. This means that your body will release hormones, which will increase your blood pressure, and it'll increase your blood glucose level, and it'll increase your anxiety, right? Because your body automatically goes into fight and flight. And when your body is in that mode, all it's thinking about is how it survives. It doesn't think strategically. And you're more prone to overreact or to make mistakes when you're in that mode. Okay. Also, ladies, any clue as to what else happens when stressors mount, when you start viewing things as hardships? Cortisol is released, which is a hormone that we talked about. And you want to guess where that sucker lands? Right in your midsection. Okay, so, but in contrast, when a situation is viewed as a challenge, your body releases hormones which promote cell repair, which trigger relaxation responses, and which stimulate efficient energy use. So when you view something as a challenge, your mind automatically starts helping your body prepare for what you need to meet that challenge. It's not a negative, it's a positive. It's not a threat, it's an opportunity, and your body responds as such. So it's more than semantics. When you're faced with something that you deem as a hardship, change your mind about it and look at it as a challenge that you need to meet. Number 4, we're almost here. Number 4 is shift to active thinking. So now it's time to work. Active thinking leads to action, of course. And in order to get yourself out of a negative situation, you got to act, you got to respond. So to shift into active thinking, you need to ask yourself questions such as, how can I best respond? Okay. How can I contain this problem so it doesn't get any worse? What aspects of this can I control? Another question you might ask is, what can I do to limit the scope or the duration, or how long this problem lasts? Okay, what can I do to reduce the downside of what's going to happen because of this event? And what can I do to increase the potential upside of this particular issue? Right? So these are the types of questions you need to ask yourself so you can begin to shift from reacting to acting. Okay? Again, I'm going to say that again. You can shift from reacting to actually acting. So again, ask yourself, how can you best respond? What aspects can you control? How can you reduce the downside and increase the upside? What can you do to limit how long this sucker lasts? And how can you contain this issue, whatever this issue is, so it doesn't get any worse? Number 5, look for the helpers or the role models. Always remember that somebody has overcome before you. Another book that I was studying and preparing for this was a book called Resilience. And it was the science of mastering life's greatest issues or challenges. And these psychiatrists, Southwick and Charney, they recommend that you become resilient, more resilient by imitating a sturdy, strong role model. They encourage you to study people that you admire who are resilient, and analyze how they deal with adversity and create rules for yourself based on your findings. These authors talked about a young lady who was, they used her as an example. She was born with spina bifida, and she, of course, had difficulty walking because of it. And she chose President Franklin Roosevelt, who you may remember from history was crippled from polio and had difficulty walking. She used him as her role model. So when she felt down because of her illness, she would ask herself, well, what would Franklin Roosevelt do? And this helped her overcome any negative feelings that she was experiencing. It helped her overcome her adversity that came with the disease that she was born with. And so I chose this particular picture for this slide intentionally because, to be honest, if pushed through and bounced back were a person, it would be this young man right here. For those of you who don't know who this is Chadwick Boseman, and he was the actor who played Black Panther, along with Thurgood Marshall and James Brown, and other roles, but Black Panther is probably his most popular. And he just recently passed away due to stage 4 cancer. And one of his agents talked about his resilience in an interview and watched him as he suffered through the pain of the tumors and the debilitating effect of chemo. And with silent dignity, he resolved to continue to fulfill his purpose. And even though he didn't tell those around him he had cancer, he kept pushing. And despite what he was going through, Black Panther and all of his other parts in the other Marvel movies, all of those were phenomenal. But to me, living his life so largely and so intentionally through his adversity was indeed his greatest performance. So think about who your role model could be. Who is the epitome of tenacity that you can use as a template to navigate your own challenge? For me, it's of course, Chadwick Boseman. It's also Judy Smith, who's a crisis manager, who the Olivia Pope character on Scandal, that's who was the inspiration for that particular character. I've studied her books, her speeches, her social feed, her white papers. And I've also, of course, studied the character that was built using the templates from her life. And all of these models help give me encouragement, insight, and direction when my bounce back game gets a little faulty. So the last thing I want to leave with you before we close out this session is that success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage that continues to count. Again, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And this quote is attributed to Winston Churchill, just to make certain that I give credit to where credit is due. So I truly hope that you all grabbed an idea or two from these tips, and that something was said that resonated in answer to a situation that you are facing right now. So thank you so very much for your time. I will see you in the session section for the Q&A. Again, this is where you can follow me. Meet me over there if you have any questions, any comments, any feedback, and make certain that you follow me on Twitter. There are a couple of other tips and strategies that I wanted to share with you that I didn't get a chance to, and I'll be certain to do that there. Thank you guys so very much. I appreciated this time with you. I look forward to seeing all of you guys over in Q&A. Take care.